At its peak, Onlyfans was being valued at $17 billion in private discussions. $17 billion, built on a 10,000-pound loan from a man's father. By 2025, that number had collapsed to $3.5 billion, an 80% drop. Not because of competition, not because of regulators, not because of the banks, because of one man, one decision, one catastrophic act of greed at the exact moment the platform had everything to lose. So how does a business generating $7.2 billion in revenue end up worth a fraction of what it should be? Let's walk through the wreckage. Onlyfans didn't start as a pawn site. That's the part the narrative always skips. It started in 2016. Tim Stockley, a British entrepreneur from Harlow, Essex, with a 10,000-pound loan from his father guy, who reportedly told him, "Tim, this is going to be the last one." The original pitch was clean. A subscription platform where creators of any kind, fitness coaches, musicians, chefs, could monetize directly from fans. No algorithm, no middleman. Direct access. The model was elegant. Creators set their own prices. OnlyFans took a 20% cut. Everyone else got 80%. Simple, scalable, and for a while, boring. Then came the turning point no one planned for. Adult creators found the platform. Unlike traditional adult entertainment, where studios owned everything and performers got pennies, OnlyFans gave them control, full creative ownership, direct payment, no gatekeeper. The platform didn't go looking for the adult content industry. The adult content industry came looking for it, and in 2018, someone noticed. Enter Leonid Redvinsky, a Ukrainian-American entrepreneur from Miami, the owner of MyFreeCams, one of the internet's oldest adult streaming platforms. A man who understood better than anyone on earth what it meant when consumers paid directly for desire. Redvinsky acquired 75% of Phoenix International, the parent company of OnlyFans, for an undisclosed sum. From the outside, the transaction barely registered. Inside, everything changed. Under Redvinsky, the platform didn't just grow, it detonated. He understood a principle that Silicon Valley had spent decades ignoring. If you let creators earn more than anywhere else on the internet, they will bring their audiences with them. He didn't need a viral marketing campaign. He just needed a better revenue split than every competitor, and he had one. Then COVID hit, March 2020. The world locked down, and strip clubs closed. Film sets shuttered, live events evaporated, and millions of people and performers, entertainers, and people who had simply lost their jobs needed money. OnlyFans was there. The growth wasn't gradual, it was vertical. Creators flooded in, subscribers flooded in behind them. By 2021, the platform had 130 million registered users and over 2 million creators. Revenue was accelerating so fast that internal projections were being revised upward every quarter. This was the golden moment, the kind of inflection point that happens once in a company's history, the kind investors write case studies about, music. And Redvinsky was extracting every dollar of it. In 2022 alone, he pulled $338 million in dividends out of the company. By 2023, that number hit $472 million. By 2024, he took $701 million in a single year. So, a total of over $1.8 billion pulled out of the business since 2021. Read that again. $1.8 billion taken out, while everyone else was told the company was pursuing growth. But here's where the story turns dark. The banks were getting nervous, and you can understand why. In December 2020, a New York Times investigation exposed Pornhub for hosting videos of rape and child sexual abuse. The report was meticulous, damning, and impossible to ignore. Within days, Visa and MasterCard didn't issue a warning. They didn't request a remediation plan. They cut the site off entirely. No negotiation, no grace period. Just gone. The adult content industry didn't just feel the tremors. It went cold overnight. Payment processors across the financial system began quietly reviewing every platform operating in the space. On looking for the next liability they hadn't noticed yet, OnlyFans was not immune to the scrutiny. It couldn't be. A BBC investigation published in May 2021 found that the platform was systematically failing to prevent underage users from appearing in explicit content, not edge cases, not isolated incidents. Systemic failure. A U.S. watchdog subsequently confirmed that images of missing children had appeared on the platform. These weren't allegations from advocacy groups that could be dismissed or litigated. These were documented findings from credible institutions with the infrastructure to act on them. The reputational heat wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was becoming unbearable. And more importantly, it was becoming actionable. The banks moved. JP Morgan Chase, BNY Mellon, Metro Bank. Accounts were being closed. The payments were being blocked. Transactions tied to adult content were being refused processing. The financial infrastructure that kept the entire machine running, the plumbing that moved billions of dollars from subscribers to creators to the company, was threatening to collapse, not theoretically, actively, in real time. Radvinsky had a choice in front of him, a real one, with real consequences either way. He could invest in serious content moderation, build the compliance infrastructure that would satisfy regulators and reassure financial partners, the kind of rigorous, expensive, time-consuming work that actually fixes the problem. He could treat this as the wake-up call it was, and build a platform that could survive institutional scrutiny. Or he could find a shortcut, something fast enough to calm the banks, invisible enough to satisfy the optics, but cheap enough not to interfere with the dividend flow. He chose the shortcut. August 19th, 2021 was the day the floor nearly fell out. Onlyfans announced, with just 6 weeks' notice, that it would ban all sexually explicit content effective October 1st, not regulated, not restricted, not create a tiered system with enhanced verification requirements. Ban it completely, permanently. The platform that had been built brick by brick on adult content. The platform where creators had been explicitly recruited with the promise of creative and financial freedom. The platform where over 90% of total revenue, billions of dollars, was generated by adult content, was going to ban adult content. Music. The stated reason was compliance with banking partners. And that part was true. Now, as far as it went, the banking pressure was real. The regulatory exposure was real. And doing nothing was genuinely not an option. But buried beneath the compliance argument was something else entirely. Something Radvinsky wasn't saying publicly. He was simultaneously in the middle of trying to raise institutional investment at a valuation north of $1 billion. Mainstream venture capital firms, the kind who could fund a serious IPO pathway, wouldn't go near a platform synonymous with pornography. Not because of personal objections. Money doesn't have personal objections, but because the downstream compliance risk, the regulatory exposure, and the reputational association made it structurally impossible to justify to their own limited partners. The ban wasn't only about the banks, it was about optics. It was about making the company legible and palatable to the kind of institutional capital that could turn Onlyfans into something Radvinsky could sell at a premium. It was about engineering the exit. The creators were a detail in that plan, an inconvenient one. The creators did not see themselves as a detail. They revolted. Within 48 hours, the internet didn't just push back, it erupted. Sex workers who had spent years building audiences, producing content, and structuring their entire financial lives around OnlyFans income were now being told the platform was pivoting away from them with 6 weeks' notice. On single parents who had used the platform to survive the economic devastation of the pandemic, people for whom OnlyFans wasn't a side hustle but a lifeline, were told their income stream was being shut down on a corporate timeline that had nothing to do with them. Professional performers who had left traditional adult studios specifically because OnlyFans gave them direct control over their work, their image, and their earnings. People who had made a values-based decision to work independently were watching that decision get invalidated overnight. The organizing happened fast. Creators coordinated across Twitter, Reddit, and private messaging groups. Mainstream journalists who had spent years covering creator economy issues picked up the story immediately. Civil liberties organizations weighed in. The backlash wasn't just loud. It was structured, documented, and sustained. It didn't burn hot for a day and fade. It kept going. 6 days later, on August 25th, 2021, OnlyFans reversed the decision entirely. The company tweeted that they had secured assurances necessary to support our diverse creator community. The ban was suspended indefinitely. Adult content would remain on the platform. 6 days. That's how long the entire plan lasted. 6 days from announcement to full reversal. The compliance argument that had been framed as a structural business necessity, the kind of decision companies describe as painful but unavoidable, dissolved in less than a week under the weight of creator backlash and public pressure, which raised an obvious question that nobody in the press asked loudly enough at the time. If the banking pressure was so severe that it required banning the core product with 6 weeks' notice, how exactly did it get resolved in 6 days with a tweet? What assurances were secured? From whom? On what terms? What changed between August 19th and August 25th that made the existential banking threat suddenly manageable? The answer, most likely, is that the threat was always more manageable than the announcement implied. The ban was a negotiating position dressed up as a compliance necessity, a way to signal to institutional investors that management was willing to make hard choices, even if when tested, it turned out they weren't. What Radvinsky didn't fully calculate was the cost of the signal itself. But here's what the reversal actually cost. The trust was gone, not damaged, not strained. Gone. creators who had built their entire livelihoods on the platform, who had turned down corporate jobs, relocated their lives, structured their finances around OnlyFans income, now knew with absolute certainty that management would throw them under a bus the moment it was financially convenient. That knowledge never left. You can't unring that bell. Once a platform proves it will abandon you when the pressure gets high enough, you never look at it the same way again. The relationship changes permanently. And in the creator economy, that relationship is everything. Competing platforms didn't waste a single day. Fansly, Patreon, emerging alternatives, they immediately launched aggressive creator recruitment campaigns. Now, we will never ban your content. It was the easiest marketing message in history. They didn't need a strategy deck. They didn't need a branding agency. They just needed to point at what OnlyFans had just done and say, "We're not them." Thousands of creators quietly began building parallel presences on other platforms. Not leaving entirely, the audience was still there, but hedging, diversifying, preparing for the next betrayal they now assumed was coming. The brand, which had been synonymous with creator empowerment, was now synonymous with creator betrayal. That's not a PR problem you fix with a press release. That's a structural identity shift. The story of OnlyFans in every future article, every investor pitch, every regulatory hearing now had a chapter called "The Week They Tried to Abandon Their Creators." That chapter doesn't disappear. Meanwhile, Radvinsky had burned his chance at institutional investment without actually getting the institutional investment. Think about that for a moment. He paid the full price of the reversal, the trust damage, the brand damage, the creator exodus risk, the competitor momentum, without capturing any of the upside he was chasing. The IPO pathway was closed. The mainstream rebrand was dead. He had alienated his creator base without satisfying the investors he was trying to attract. It was the worst possible outcome, a move designed to maximize value that destroyed value instead. He had tried to play both sides of the table and ended up losing at both. And then, rather than rebuilding trust, or rather than investing in the infrastructure that would make the platform resilient, he kept pulling dividends. $701 million in 2024 alone. Not reinvested, not deployed into compliance systems or creator relations or payment processor negotiations. Extracted, taken off the table, as if the business were a savings account he was draining before closing it. The bill finally came due in 2025. By May of that year, Radvinsky was openly shopping the platform. The asking price was $8 billion, and to be fair to him, the number wasn't invented. It was anchored to real financials: $7.2 billion in gross revenue, $684 million in pre-tax profit, 80% market share in paid creator content. On paper, you could look at those numbers and argue the valuation was not just reasonable but conservative. A healthy tech platform with those metrics and that market dominance should command a premium. But the buyers weren't stupid, and the buyers weren't just looking at the revenue line. The first serious conversation was with Forest Road Company, a Los Angeles-based media investment firm with experience in entertainment and digital media. Those talks went nowhere. The gap between what Radvinsky wanted and what the market believed the platform was actually worth, after the trust damage, after the regulatory exposure, after the payment processor relationships that kept threatening to suffocate the business, after the content liability lawsuits accumulating in the background, was simply too wide to bridge. Forest Road looked at the real picture and walked away, because the legal exposure wasn't theoretical anymore. It was in motion. No, and accelerating. Ofcom, the UK's media regulator, fined Phoenix International, the parent company of OnlyFans, roughly £1 million in early 2025 for failing to provide accurate data on age verification. That fine wasn't the damage. The fine was the signal. It told every other regulator in every other jurisdiction exactly where the vulnerabilities were. A Reuters investigation found that at least 128 people had filed complaints to US authorities about content on the platform. The legal exposure wasn't a cloud on the horizon anymore. It was weather you were already standing in. The $8 billion number started to look less like a valuation and more like a prayer. By January 2026, the number had collapsed. The new figure was $3.5 billion in equity, with a total enterprise value of $5.5 billion when you factor in existing debt. And the counterparty sitting across the table wasn't a sovereign wealth fund or a blue-chip private equity firm. It was Architect Capital, a San Francisco-based asset lender that typically backs early-stage startups and Latin American buy-now-pay-later companies. That's who ends up with the keys to what was once supposed to be a $17 billion empire, not SoftBank. not KKR. Not a strategic acquirer with distribution and brand muscle. An asset-based lender known for distressed and emerging market positions. Music read that again. The platform that was supposed to IPO. The platform that generated more revenue than most publicly traded media companies. The platform that, at its peak, and processed more transactions than some regional banks. Ended up in exclusive negotiations with an asset lender that usually backs fintech startups in Colombia and Brazil. That's not a sale. That's a liquidation wearing a suit. Let's talk about the math of greed, because it's worth understanding precisely. Radvinsky extracted over $1.8 billion in dividends between 2021 and 2024. Every single dollar he pulled out was a dollar that did not go into compliance infrastructure. A dollar that did not go into content moderation systems capable of satisfying regulators. A dollar that did not go into rebuilding creator trust or strengthening the payment processor relationships that kept threatening to cut off the platform's oxygen supply. He wasn't investing in the business, he was harvesting it, and sophisticated buyers can see that. Now, when a private equity firm or a serious strategic acquirer runs due diligence on a business, one of the first things they model is the reinvestment rate. How much of the earnings went back into building the platform versus how much was extracted? When that number skews as heavily as it did at Onlyfans, it tells you something important. The business has been treated like a dividend vehicle, not a growth asset. The infrastructure is thinner than the revenue suggests. The moat is narrower than the market share implies. The PE multiple, the price buyers are willing to pay for each dollar of earnings, collapsed from the kind of premium tech company multiples Radvinsky was dreaming of, down to somewhere between 3 and 5 times EBITDA. That's the floor. That's the multiple you get for distressed platforms in legally complex, yet reputationally damaged sectors. Not the ceiling of a growing tech company, the floor of an asset someone is buying at a discount because the previous owner bled it. He ran a cash machine like a piggy bank, and when he finally decided to sell, every buyer in the room could see exactly how much had been taken out, exactly what had been left behind, and exactly how hollow the infrastructure had become beneath the revenue figures. That gap between what a business earns and what its owner actually extracts versus reinvests is one of the most reliable early warning signals that a company's real value is being quietly destroyed while the surface numbers still look strong. It shows up before the regulatory fines, before the valuation collapse, before the failed sale process. It shows up in the dividend history, the capex ratios, the compliance headcount, the legal budget. If you know where to look, you can see it years in advance. And if you want to understand how to spot that pattern earlier, to read the signals before they become headlines. That's exactly the kind of analysis we break down in our newsletter every week. The link is in the description. The inside information is free. The regret of not reading it isn't. OnlyFans isn't dead. Let's be clear about that. It still generates $7.2 billion in gross revenue. It still controls over 80% of the paid creator content market. The business model, 20% of every transaction, with 80% going directly to creators, is still one of the most elegant margin structures anywhere on the internet. Simple, scalable, and brutally effective. For every dollar a fan spends, the platform keeps 20 cents and never has to touch the content, manage the talent, or own the inventory. That's not a business. That's a toll booth on a highway that builds itself. But the empire that could have been worth $17 billion, a number that was floated in serious private conversations at the absolute height of pandemic growth, backed by real revenue trajectories and real market dominance, is now being sold at a fraction of that figure to a buyer that most people working in finance had genuinely never heard of before this deal was announced. Not a strategic acquirer, not a sovereign wealth fund, not a household name in private equity, an asset lender, a distressed capital shop, the kind of buyer you end up with when every better option has already looked at your books and walked away. And here's what makes that so striking, as the underlying business didn't collapse. The revenue is still there, the market share is still there, the transaction volume is still there. What collapsed was the multiple, the premium that investors are willing to pay on top of the earnings, because they believe in where the business is going. That premium evaporated, because premium valuations require trust. They require the belief that the people running the asset are building something, not harvesting it. That belief was gone, and without it, even genuinely strong fundamentals get repriced at distressed asset levels. The creator community that built the thing, still there, still posting, still paying the 20%, still functioning as the engine that drives every dollar of that $7.2 billion. Nothing about their behavior changed. They kept showing up, they kept producing, they kept growing their subscriber counts and delivering the content that made the platform indispensable to its users. The engine never stopped running, but the trust between creator and platform, that invisible social contract that made OnlyFans genuinely different from every other adult content platform in history, was broken on August 19th, 2021, and it was never fully repaired. Not because the reversal didn't happen, It did, not because the creators didn't come back, they did, but because everyone now understood the actual order of priorities. When it came down to a choice between creator welfare and institutional optics, Radvinsky chose institutional optics without hesitation. He reversed it when the cost was too high, but the choice itself had already been made. You don't forget that. You adapt to it. You build contingencies around it. You stop being loyal to something that showed you exactly how disposable you are the moment the math changes. That shift from loyal creator to hedging creator is invisible in the revenue numbers, but it's real and it's permanent. The banks didn't destroy OnlyFans. The regulators didn't destroy OnlyFans. The stigma of the adult content industry, the thing that mainstream media always assumed would be the platform's fatal vulnerability, didn't destroy OnlyFans. None of the external forces that were supposed to bring it down actually did. One man's decision to sacrifice long-term platform integrity for short-term institutional optics, and then continue extracting hundreds of millions in dividends every single year while the damage quietly compounded beneath the surface, did. Not dramatically, not in a single moment, slowly. The way rot works, from the inside, invisibly, until the structure can no longer hold the weight it's supposed to carry. The lesson here isn't really about the adult content industry. It isn't about payment processors or UK regulators or content moderation policy. Those are the details. The actual lesson is about what happens when the person who controls an asset, any asset in any industry, treats it like a personal ATM instead of a living business. A living business requires reinvestment. It requires trust maintenance. It requires the willingness to occasionally forego short-term extraction in exchange for long-term compounding. A personal ATM just requires a PIN code and a withdrawal limit you never quite respect. Radvinsky had one of the most defensible market positions in the history of digital media. Network effects so strong that competitors couldn't dislodge him even when they tried. A creator base so embedded that the switching costs were genuinely high. A payment model so clean it was almost self-sustaining. He had the rare combination of structural moat, revenue scale, and brand recognition that most founders spend their entire careers trying to build. He had all of that, and he chose the ATM. The content was always good. The creators were always there. The market was always real. The platform's potential, the $17 billion version of this story, the IPO version, the institutional capital version, was never fantasy. It was the natural destination for a business with those fundamentals, so managed with even a modest amount of long-term discipline. The greed was the only thing that was optional, and in the end, the greed was the only thing that mattered.